Let's do this the proper way, the way he deserves.
This man right here is a political cartoonist from the Arizona Daily Star. He's been doing it for years and doing it better than many. He's been known around the world with his cartoons and very recently, especially, been making some headlines and things for sure. He's been making me feel sane during this entire hullabaloo since 2016, I'll say. And right now, he's going to make you feel better by showing you how to do what he does, because what he does the best. It's my man and my friend, one of my favorite people in the world. It's Mr. David Fitzsimmons!
Thank you, Mr. Powers, for that wonderful introduction. My dad would have loved it, and my mom might have actually believed it. That was so kind. That was really good of you. I am so happy to be here with people who are creative and who love making art, because that's what I really like to talk about, even more than politics. Art to me is just everything. It kind of, it rescued me in a sense. You know, I'm an old boomer, right? I'm 110 years old, but in the 60s when I was growing up, if you weren't an alpha male, you were dirt. You were lower than dirt. So I thank the gods that I had this one gift of the ability to make marks that had some value to others. With that in mind, I'm going to start off with my PowerPoint because it's a lot more interesting than I am. So I'm going to try this. And Frank, you let me know if this is coming up big on the screen. All right. How's that?
And you're looking good, looking great, perfect.
All right, let's roll. This is me. There I am again. I've been doing cartoons since 1886. That's since Geronimo was a paper boy. That means, let's see, I started begging the Star to hire me in, when I was 16. So yeah, it was about 10 years before they actually hired me. I'm syndicated to over 800 papers, which is great. And my PowerPoint was hacked by Russian trolls. We'll make the best of it. Here's an actual letter from a reader. You're partisan, biased, and unfair. I didn't edit the spelling. And that person's absolutely right about my political cartoons. They are political cartoons. They are partisan. They are biased. And they are unfair. All political cartoonists, all social protest artists are partisan, biased, and unfair. This is me as a child. I started out drawing Nixon on the wall in my home, just compelled to make marks, loved my Crayolas, loved my watercolors, loved my paints, loved my walls. The master sergeant was not that pleased with my drawing ability. In school, terrible student, constantly distracted, thinking of jokes and riddles. And I loved comic books, so I was constantly thinking about comic books and comic book characters. And the best possible experience for me was having a teacher at the front of the classroom that I could caricature and draw. I practiced and practiced drawing faces, caricatures. Thank you, Mrs. Terry Bagwell, my 7th grade history teacher at Naylor Middle School. Where do cartoonists come from? We come from the back of the classroom, where we should have been paying attention. But instead, I was making rude drawings of Mrs. Bagwell and passing them to Maurice Russo, who got into trouble. And here it is, 40 years later, I'm drawing political cartoons about Republicans knocking down public education to fund private schools. I'm drawing cartoons about, well, I just love to draw elephants. The old Republican, whoops, boom. Here we go. This is about, boom, Black Lives Matter. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, I love PowerPoint. I'm juvenile. This is how long I've been doing cartoons. Bill Clinton? That's too easy. The best cartoons, of course, ideally, few words as possible. I tend to sin against that quite a bit. I do love words as much as I love images. You can see here, I am influenced by Nickelodeon. Yeah, Cartoon Network. I love this simplistic kind of Hanna-Barbera 50s style of rendering. Boom. There we are, the old Republican and the new Republican. Hate mail. All right. What you learn in school today? To not reopen schools in the middle of a pandemic. You might see some influence of Chuck Jones in here from Warner Brothers as well. Boom. Fox News. Oh, what a bias this cartoon boy has. Boom. School shootings. So every day I wake up, I form an opinion, and then I try to think, I free associate my way towards finding a metaphor or an analogy, some kind of visual image that I can use to express my idea in a fresh and imaginative fashion. So, for example, when a shooting occurred in 2007, who knows what school, I can't remember what school it was. I thought, okay, how about this time I'll depict it as a game, since we do treat it like a game. It just goes in a circle. How about a human skull? Oh, problem solved. And the good thing about a cartoon like this is I can use it again and again, even like 4 years later when it's still true and Tucson suffers from a shooting. Newsflash, that's not birdseed. Yeah, I do have an editor, and I'm very lucky in that for the past 20 years with this same editor, the only thing she really edits me for, is spelling or occasionally the content or what she would call the taste present in a cartoon. And I'm one of the luckiest cartoonists I know in terms of editorial freedom. Do I get hate mail? Yeah. Everything you do in life's going to piss off somebody. Here's my studio. Look at this happy, beautiful place. Amazing that anyone would wish me poor sentiments. Here comes one now. I do get death threats. I get nice notes from people. But I love when people take a cartoon and they'll scrawl on it. Like lower right-hand corner in the red ink, it says, "Who'd want to use your childlike drawings? Wake up, jackass." Yeah, like I wouldn't recognize my mom's handwriting. Right. When I'm not on my drawing board or writing a column, I'm doing stand-up, which is good. It's always good to have a backup gig when you're in the world of art. Like you may have not heard me, but earlier when I was talking to Mr. Powers, I pointed out that I was a muralist. I was a t-shirt designer. I designed billboards. I did lots of graphic design. I freelanced like crazy. I took every job I could just to get the experience. I recommend if you want to be a cartoonist, get that journalism degree, emulate your favorite cartoonist, talk to them like I did. I would send off letters when I was young. I was amazed at the responses I would get from cartoonists like Pat Oliphant, Jeff McNelly, or Herb Block. At least cartoonists in my field who are very generous with their time. Emulate your favorite cartoonist. I started out as a mimic. I copied just about every style I loved and admired because I really didn't have my own voice at that point in my youth when I was about 16 or 17. That sort of came along in my mid-20s. Practice, get into a deadline discipline, keep everything you do. I keep everything I do. And I look at the mistakes I make and I try to do better next time. Constant review and assessment. So when I said earlier, I syndicate over 800. Now there's just 700 newspapers left. And I'm grateful for that because, oh my God, there's only 600 newspapers left in the world. This is a moment of pride for me to be reproduced in China daily out of Beijing. It's the only time I was ever published in a cartoon of mine was published in a publication that had a circulation of 1 billion. Pretty good. News bulletin. Newspapers are dying. 1,500 American cities no longer have newspapers. So as you know, you got to look for a digital platform for your work these days. These are newspapers that aren't doing so well. Denver Post, Baltimore Sun, Miami Herald, Buffalo News, St. Louis Post, even the Tribune, Chicago, are teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. The pandemic has sort of been the nail in the coffin. Here's an example of how bad they are. Cleveland Plain Dealer, Cleveland, big city, big newspaper at one time, employing roughly 3,000 employees. Last I checked with a friend of mine at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, they had 18 employees and no cartoonists. 23 editorial cartoonists in the United States. We're politically evenly divided. You don't see that many conservative cartoonists here because we're a suburban area. You'll see the more conservative cartoonists in rural American newspapers. Oh, there's now 22 because last week a friend of mine got laid off at the Omaha Herald. Favorite cartoonists of mine. I want to start with Goya. Amazing guy because he was the first genius who was a fat cat living in the court of the King of Spain and thought, hey, I heard there's a war going on. I think I'll leave the comfort of Toledo and I'm going to go out to see what's going on. And he made these drawings about the horrors of war, which are today famous. However, at the time when he showed these engravings, along with his engravings critical of the Catholic Church and prostitution, he thought it in his best interest to never display these cartoons until his death. And upon his death, many of these engravings were published and shared with the masses. Heinrich Clay. You'll find your own favorites if you go back in history. This guy was a cartoonist in Germany, really prominent around the turn of the 19th century. I love to look at Heinrich Clay just because of the beauty of his draftsmanship. And the other thing I like about his work is it has an unfinished feeling. So you can see what I call the tentative lines he would make when he was trying to formulate a complete figure. And you can see how he was searching to get the anatomy just right. And for that, I have to say, I'm so grateful. In school, I was forced to take anatomy classes. Benefited me later. I whined and complained the entire time. Otto Dix, a veteran of the First World War and a German, beautiful social protest art. Among the first artists to create social protest art of the genre that you and I are, in the modern era, are familiar with. This is one of my personal favorites, a woman, Katha Kollwitz. She was an art professor in Germany. In the First World War, she was a patriot, a German patriot, until her son was drafted and killed on the Western Front. Her grief over the loss of her son propelled much of her very beautiful social protest art about the absurdity of war and the tragedy that mothers in particular suffer. She was a professor of art in Germany up till 1945. And of course, the Nazis did not like her, and she was kept under house arrest. I also love the work of Chuck Jones. What a great draftsman. His line work, oh, so beautiful. My God. Hanna-Barbera. Oh, I love these guys. They eased my conscience over those days when I was a lazy cartoonist. The broad, simple planes, that 1950s kind of retro feeling. Fantastic. Yummy. Jeff McNelly, a cartoonist who was at his prominence when I was young, loved this guy. He would produce this work of art on a daily basis. So imagine you get an assignment to produce a rendering of a general store, make a joke about a guy running for president, and render it and ink it and get it into the mail and out to your syndicate by 5 o'clock. And do this on a daily basis, 5 days a week. And that concludes my PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, wait, come back. Encore.
But yeah, I do want to come back because I want to mention all those artists I admired. You know, I loved art school. Art school is great. I really learned about those artists after art school, just wandering bookstores and finding my the artists that I loved sort of on my own. Okay, I'll try it again. Present your entire screen. Oh, man. Oh, select window or screen. Entire screen. Oh, man. Bye, Frank.
Bye, buddy.
All right. This is another artist I love and adore. An adult graphic novelist whose work you can find in comic book stores. I am an adult who wanders comic book stores, which is akin to being a creep in a porn shop. And I know this only because I was at Fantasy Comics last year and I was looking for a Hellboy. And I had this feeling that someone was staring at me, and I looked over my shoulder and it was another journalist friend of mine. And we looked at each other with horror and embarrassment that we'd both been seen in a comic book store. I love comic books. I love Mike Mignola's work, much like the artists I cited earlier, Hanna-Barbera, Chuck Jones, beautiful, bold, flat planes of color, very indistinct linear work. So much of the weight of the artwork is carried by the beauty of the composition and the power of the anatomical renderings. And you can see how it shows up in my work here. The Chuck Jones Warner Brothers feel of the very simple imagery. When I started out drawing cartoons 40 years ago, I was a pointillist. I was like George Surratt. I would spend 12 hours on a photorealistic cartoon. I soon learned I didn't have that kind of time, so I learned to speed it up. Do I steal from other artists? Yes, I do. There's an example. Thank you, Pablo Picasso, Guernica. Yeah, I stole his image and used it as a metaphor in a cartoon about George Bush, because President George Bush took up painting when he was no longer president, and I wanted to remind the painter that his masterpiece would have been this portrait of the horror of Iraq, an unnecessary war which he launched. And so I used Picasso's Guernica to bring home the horror of the Iraq war. Thanks, Pablo. How do we get away with stealing the images of other cartoonists? Like in this case, I've used Linus, who's a pop icon representing insecurity, the needs of some alpha males for their blue blanket in the form of weaponry. We do it lower right-hand corner, right next to the signature. You apologize. I apologize to Schultz for stealing the cartoon image. Always apologize before and then say you're sorry. I've yet to have gotten into trouble for using those kind of images simply because I apologize. Readers react to ink on paper. And what do they react to? Issues that strike us to our very heart, like the murder of George Floyd. I drew this cartoon. When I saw the Minneapolis policeman on George Floyd's neck, I don't know why, but I thought of, well, I'm sure a slaver in Africa no doubt had his knee on an African's neck, and a plantation owner had his knee on his property's neck, and a Klansman after the Civil War had his knee on post-Reconstruction African Americans' neck, and even during the Jim Crow era of the 50s, knee still on the neck. And here we are in 2020, knee still on the neck. Now, this cartoon was widely distributed. I got a lot of positive mail for the cartoon, but also generated controversy. In one instance, for example, Wiley, Texas. Wiley is a suburb of Dallas. It is 80% white. No surprise. The governor wanted the school where 3 teachers used my cartoon in a classroom discussion. He wanted the school investigated, and he wanted the teachers fired for using this cartoon because, you know, it's a terrible thing to introduce ideas into classrooms. And the National Fraternal Order of Police got involved, calling the cartoon, comparing police officers to slave owners. Yeah, that was a mischaracterization. Abhorrent, disgusting. And once they got involved, man, it was all over. The school district apologized to the parents, and I got great press. Thank you. National Coalition Against Censorship weighed in. And I just include this because if you're thinking that America is the land of the free and the brave and we don't have censorship, it goes on constantly around the world and here in our own country, especially these days when there's been quite a chill. Well, I got such email over that. I loved it, such as, educate yourself, you Bolshevik dumbass. I was impressed that Frank Powers spelled Bolshevik correctly. All right. I don't know if I'll read this, but you can see these are the sort of mail I get. Butt hurt, can't spew your idiocy, audience and the legions of BLM and Antifa, get fucked, cuck, here you go again, shut up, no one wants your opinion. That was my editor. I like this one. Someone will kick your stupid ass, you prick. I love my mail. I come to care about some issues as an artist simply because of what I call proximity. You know, if you're near some kind of suffering, you tend to be empathetic and you take up the cause. I had an older late brother, Vietnam vet, closeted gay man for much of his life. So I actually became an ally of gay civil rights. Trump and race, I feel strongly about Trump and race because of my daughter, her beautiful husband, and my beautiful grandchildren, and their story that on the past on 4 occasions where they live in Phoenix, they've been hassled by racists ridiculing and mocking them for being in a mixed marriage in front of my grandchildren. And what really surprised me is in their anecdotes, on all 4 occasions, the racists were young white men. So yeah, words matter. Words from a president matter. Ink on paper. That's my thing I want to talk about. Ink on paper. Sometimes just random lines that are meaningless. When the ink forms into meaningful ideas, it can be a terrible thing. But never forget, it's just ink on paper. Not every Trump supporter is a racist, says the cartoonist with his ink on paper. That's true. But every racist is a Trump supporter. I wonder why. This cartoon got people upset, and when people get upset, that's what I tell them. Hey, what are you upset about? It's just a cartoon. It's just ink on paper. It's just an abstract idea, like a bumper sticker. Feel free to forget it, like this lady did. I'm a racist, you jackass. I'm Mexican thought. Isn't that funny? What idiotic statement. You've seen your day. Have a good, yeah, bye. Do you ever stop crying and whining? No, I don't. I'm an Arizona Wildcat fan. Hey, Arizona! I love the politics of Arizona as a social protest artist. For years, it's been very conservative, and I represent the opposite end of the spectrum. So for me, it's paradise. Where do you find your wingnuts? Try Arizona. They're in the legislature. The history of social protest art, as quickly as I can go through it. Well, you have Cave Guy. He's in the cave. He doesn't want to go hunting with the rest of the crew. He's got some artistic ability. So he's going to have a little fun. He's going to wish the rest of the hunters good luck. Here, I'm going to draw you killing those woolly mammoths. Go out and have a great time. You go ahead, guys. Kill that mammoth. I'll stay back here with the cave ladies. And everything will be great until I make the fatal mistake of thinking it'd be really funny for me to draw on the cave wall the chieftain of our little tribal unit. And chieftains typically don't like being ridiculed or mocked, and cartoonists typically lose their heads for their opinions. Damier, 18th century, quite a leap, right? 30,000 years ago, boom, 18th century. Damier! Here's a wonderful likeness of the legislature of Paris. Looks kind of, I can see Mitch McConnell right there up in the corner. He made a nearly fatal mistake. He drew the King of France using the metaphor of a pear. I didn't quite get it until a little research. Pear is slang for fool or idiot. King did not appreciate being called a king, a fool, or an idiot by an artist with ink on paper. So Damier spent quite a bit of time in the Bastille just for ink on paper. Benito, favorite revolutionary. I love you all revolutionaries like Cuban names. Comandante Jorge Washington, Benito Franklin, kite flyer, newspaper guy, idea man, famous for this cartoon. You probably all saw it in middle school. Yeah, snake, cut up into pieces. Each piece representing a colony, get together, fight off the British. These guys believe that you cut a snake up into parts, rejoin the pieces at sunset, it would return to life. I think it's because Washington was growing hemp on his plantation. That's my theory. But I include this cartoon because if you had drawn this cartoon during the Revolutionary War, if you'd been caught by the British dragoons, you would have been drawn and quartered on the spot. You would have been executed for drawing this, and you would have been executed in a cruel fashion. Your limbs would have been tied and tethered to horses, and with sabers, your limbs would have been gently chopped, but not completely, because the horses would finish the job. That is why I think our revolutionaries were so fond of free expression. Most of them were free expression advocates. Thomas Paine, Paul Revere, who was a silversmith and a cartoonist and went on the Midnight Ride, and Benjamin Franklin, the newspaper guy. They made sure in the First Amendment that freedom of expression was protected from government interference. Thomas Nast, a hero cartoonist, Boss Tweed, 19th century. I include Nast because Nast blessed the Republican Party with the elephant as a symbol, blessed the Democratic Party with the jackass for its symbol, blessed America with Uncle Sam as its symbol, and my favorite, he gave us this dude. Tom Nass came from Bavaria, brought with him folk tales of this guy. I always wondered, why does Santa Claus always wear a red suit and look the way he does? Well, if you look at costumes of Bavaria, 18th century, every guy in Bavaria looks like St. Nicholas. So Thomas Nass just brought with him his folk stories about St. Nicholas drawn as a Bavarian man, and that's why the weird dude at the shopping mall wears the red suit and has the long white beard and smoke God knows what in his pipe. Boom. He's famous for criticizing Boss Tweed with this cartoon depicting him as a man who cares only for wealth. Boom. Tweed's famous saying, I don't care what they write about me. People voted for me can't read, but they can understand the pictures. And that, artists, is the value of the visual image. It communicates quickly. How valuable is the image? Sometimes the artist himself is so valued, he's rewarded, like Thomas Nass, who was loved by Theodore Roosevelt. Loved so much, Roosevelt appointed Nass ambassador to Ecuador, where he went and died within 6 weeks of malaria. Boom. Politicians have always tried to muzzle satirists. Here's a story. Pennypacker. Side view. Guy looks like a parrot. Cartoonist constantly drew him as a parrot. He hated being drawn as a parrot. He was a mouthpiece of corruption. The analogy was perfect. He went to his lawmakers. Hey, make it a crime to ever publish an image of a politician drawn as an animal, a bird, a snake, a jackasses. They loved it. They passed the law. He signed it into effect. Within a week, an editorial appeared praising this law as a wonderful animal protection act, accompanied by a portrait of Pennypacker drawn as a fruit. It certainly didn't break the law, but it made people laugh. The law was never tested. It was repealed. Pennypacker was not reelected. You know, the only reason I love to include the Pennypacker thing, and there are lots of stories, legislatures all over America are constantly trying to censor cartoonists. In spite of what the First Amendment declares about Congress shall make no law. And hopefully, let's see, this next character will come up. Look at that, another old white boomer, dead guy. I include him because a president tried to censor him. Paul Conrad was on Richard Nixon's White House enemies list because Conrad was brutal about Richard Nixon. Republicans hated him and were constantly trying to stop him from drawing. One sued him for libel, malice aforethought, very difficult to prove. The background on this story is the mayor of LA was running for the White House, and Paul Conrad thought, hey, LA's got race riots, terrible problems. Don't run for president. You're not going to win. Stay here. And he drew this. Sap buckets hanging off the trees in New Hampshire, Yorty for president, and down below is the caption. The sap is running in the maple trees in New Hampshire. Now, this cartoon was considered libelous, according to Yorty, because he was being characterized as a sap, which he thought was a libelous remark about his intelligence quotient. The case went nowhere. I can't think of a single case in which a cartoonist has been successfully sued for libel. And also, we got editors looking out for us. I wish Paul Conrad had an editor, for example, when this one ran, or didn't run, as the case may be, or David Levine when this one ran, a cartoon of Henry Kissinger relating to the world. Here's a story about ink on paper for you. Munich. I wanted to be in the room where it happened. I wanted to be at the University of Munich before I died because a very heroic young woman was in the room where this amazing thing happened. Her name was Sophie Scholl. She was 21. She was a kindergarten teacher. She was a college student at the University of Munich. She hated Hitler. She hated the Nazis. And she was so brave, she formed a resistance group called the White Rose Society with her brother, a veteran soldier who'd served in Stalingrad, and some other friends. And she did something really brave. She mimeographed essays, just words on paper, ink on paper, and she distributed those essays in the dark of night. On one occasion, though, she was very brave. when she and her brother schemed to take a stack of 300 leaflets they had made to this site in the University of Munich. Behind those two double doors up behind the three arches is where the Gestapo was meeting in a national conference in 1943, I think it was. Maybe it was 44. She arrived to leave her leaflets on the floor. She was late. The bell rang. The doors swung open. She flung her essays across the hall, turned and ran up these steps. Dogs were unleashed. She was captured and arrested. 21. What she had committed by simply writing down her thoughts was treason against the Nazi state. She was tried before a national tribunal of judges, and at 4:50 that afternoon, she was found guilty of treason against the German state. And at 5 o'clock, she was taken downstairs to the basement where she was guillotined, along with co-conspirators, simply for ink on paper. Some cultures, some societies, some structures, some systems fear ideas. For me, the revolutionary value of the American Revolution was the theory that we would be fearless about ideas. I'm profoundly touched that there is not only a bust of Sophie Scholl, but a fresh white rose. The custodian told me in thick German that someone leaves roses every day in her memory in that hall. And outside the Munich University is this great entryway, this curving walkway, and on the ground it looks like homework scattered, left behind, but no, it was instead the bronzed writings of Sophie Scholl, preserved to last the ages. In Munich, you will find no evidence of the rule of the Nazis. You will, however, find her writings, which are embedded in this cobblestone for the ages. Her words were smuggled out, reproduced, and airdropped over the people of Germany until the end of the war. That is her death notice. Sophie Scholl, 1943. My hero. Speaking of the Second World War, story about a kid from Phoenix Union High School. Bill Malden, another cartoonist. Didn't want to be there. Really didn't enjoy being a rifleman in his combat unit and going up to southern Italy. He likes drawing cartoons, which he did for Stars and Stripes. He drew about these guys, Willie and Joe. Willie and Joe are revolutionary because it's not clear what ethnic group they belong to. And they're also dirty, exhausted, bitching, and fatigued. And the officers in the army did not appreciate Malden's drawings. Soldiers loved his drawings. Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss, was a political cartoonist during the Second World War. And many of his works are political. For example, Horton Hears a Who, Dr. Seuss said, was inspired by Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In Horton Hears a Who, he wanted to use his artistic talent to express the notion that, hey, there were people down there. We're here, we're here. So when Horton heard a who, he was actually hearing the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thank you, you soft-hearted cartoonists. Americans love satire. We do. Here's a story about a preacher and a porn hustler. Who's waking up now? Jerry Falwell versus Larry Flint. Larry Flint was a pornographer, owned Hustler magazine. A lot of tasteless cartoons and satire in that publication, including this one, which ran on the back of his magazine, a parody of the Campari ads. And in this, Jerry Falwell talks about his first time having sex in an outhouse with his mother using the Holy Bible as toilet paper. Jerry Falwell did not appreciate this, decided he couldn't sue for libel. He was going to try something new. He was going to sue for causing emotional stress. $1 gazillion. This case wound all the way through the courts, made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided in its wisdom, no, this suit can't go through. Get out of here, you knucklehead. Because if you can sue a satirist for causing emotional stress, if you can sue an artist for causing emotional stress, it's all over for John Oliver, Chris Rock, Trevor Noah, Rush Limbaugh, Greg Gutfield, Dennis Miller, Mad Magazine is gone. So we Americans, we fear no idea, right? Here's an example of how an idea can be feared. A joke. Some people couldn't even whisper a joke. After meeting with Premier Khrushchev, a Russian apparatchik was arrested for shouting, "Khrushchev is lunatic," as he left Kremlin. Soviet court sentenced him to 21 years in Siberian Gulag. 1 year for insulting Premier, 20 years in addition for revealing state secret. Now, when my friend who was a cartoonist told me this, he worked for a publication called Crocodile magazine. I was astonished to consider that, yeah, some societies are so uptight about censorship, you dare not even whisper a joke. Because humor is the most effective weapon you have against authoritarians. Example, this guy here, John Stewart of Egypt, Bassem Rafat Mohammed Youssef. Hilarious for 2 years until he was had to leave his country. But you can be proud, Americans. He was inspired by his hero, an American arrested for obscenity in Milwaukee in '72. I hope you're already starting to guess who it could be. Yes, my father, George Carlin. George Carlin, who was an American arrested twice, who was inspired by another American arrested twice in '61, '62, and in Greenwich Village in '64 for obscenities. I just want to exclude this because your freedom as an artist to render what you want digitally, these are the heroes who risked it all, their careers, to advance our right to say, draw, speak, render, just as much whatever you like. Authoritarians fear ideas. Tiananmen Square. Look at this. All these young college students gathering in '89. What did they want? Right to vote, democracy, representative government. Look at that image in the back. What a beautiful image. Looks like it's inspired by ours, Statue of Liberty. They called this figure the goddess of democracy. The Chinese government surrounded Tiananmen Square with black drapes and one night sent in tanks and massacred, they're not certain of the number, anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 individuals. You've seen this image. This is the aftermath. One brave man standing up against tanks because you can't kill a good idea. Our revolutionaries understand that. Even today, the Chinese government doesn't understand it. Trying to censor the internet. Good luck with that, man. Iran, they don't understand that. Guy with a gun, like he's going to stop these people. We're going to make them give up on the idea of democracy. Can force it for a time, but it just doesn't last. Brittle societies do not endure. Flexible societies under rule of law tend to endure. This is my cartoon response to what happened in Tehran. And I'm proud to say this cartoon's used in a TED Talk by a friend of mine who's an Iranian dissident / professor who liked the idea of this cartoon. You can't kill a good idea. Another hero, Athena, an Iranian young lady. During that last election, she didn't like the ballot counters, like some of us may not approve of the ballot counting going on in our own country. She decided to render the mullahs as chimpanzees and goats. Big mistake, Athena. 12 years in prison. Well, 12 years plus time because she made the mistake upon hearing her sentence of standing in the courtroom, shaking hands with her lawyer, who was a man. Forbidden to shake hands with a man in a courtroom. So she got additional time. Thankfully, it was reduced to 18 months, thanks to the efforts of Amnesty International and the World Uproar. World Uproar matters. It can change things. You know, words do matter. Jamaat Ahmad Khashoggi, this guy, right? Wordsmith, words matter. You're right, journalists are the enemy of the people, said the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia when he murdered Jamal Khashoggi. Our president afforded comfort to people who want to murder their journalists with his words. This cartoon, I'm pleased to say, received a lot of distress globally. And you'll notice my style is quick. It takes me generally 2 to 2.5 hours to render a cartoon. I use a light table. So I trace and build the image using pencil and paper. And I will go through 10 to 20 roughs before I get the composition just right. The story about the enemy of the people, Ali Farzad, a cartoonist, just an artist, cheerful guy. Beautiful cartoon. Wordless, says it all, right? Not only are we going to inspect your bags, we want to inspect what you're thinking. And under the guise of nationalism and flag waving, corruption will flourish. Well, Assad of Syria did not like my Syrian friend's cartoons, and he sent goons to his home with large bricks. Those men used those large bricks to crush the hands of my friend, Ali. Well, this is an image of him when he was smuggled out to a hospital, I believe, in Jordan. Within 3 days, he had recovered to the point where he could render a likeness and tweet it out to the world. And I love this. I think it says it all. It's a beautiful image. In this one upright finger, he expresses the human hunger for respect, dignity, freedom. Mexico City, a gathering of artists concerned about artists being killed in Latin America and the third world for their images. I just include this because it's a cool sculpture made from semi-automatic weapons outside a museum where my cartoons were shown in Mexico City at the time. Pretty awesome. No more deaths. This is about border. I love to draw about border issues here because we're in such denial about the terrible pain and suffering that we cause through our inaction.
But just a second ago, so give us a refresh because this is amazing.
All right.
Take a pause. I'll even talk for a second. How important is the stuff that you just saw right there? It's blowing my mind. For him to show you these examples of what it is to be brave with ink on paper, to be a cartoonist, to get a message about your own freedom and your own points of view and put your own life on the line. That's something. And that's why, again, I always talk about cartoonists like this. And I talk about this man for being brave because it is brave. It's brave to stand up against authority like that. And it's something you can do with literally from your home with a pencil and paper. It's really important. It's a hell of a lesson.
And I want to add on that. When I was an art director, I developed a skill which all of you will have to develop. And that is the ability to argue the logic of your art. Oh, what could be more painful than having to argue the logic of your art? But so many of my cartoonist friends have gone to jail, have been forced to argue the logic of the art. And I found as an art director, dealing with other artists, and in myself, when I had dealt with art directors, you have to become fluent in the vocabulary of art because you really, all these artists like myself will say, well, it's just my cartoon. It's my idea. Take it or leave it. Well, yeah, in an ideal world, maybe that would be the case. All right, I'm going to go back to presenting. Okay, lower left-hand corner, Pedro Molina, an artist I've long admired. He was in Mexico City with me 2 years ago from Nicaragua, and he discovered after this photo was taken, he was no longer allowed to return to Nicaragua, and his wife and his child were being expelled, and he had to figure out where he was going to live because his cartoons were critical of Daniel Ortega. Right-hand corner, Nadia Chiari. I include her because she was one of the prominent voices behind the Arab Spring movement that roiled the Middle East and Europe. She did it with a cartoon character, a cat named Willis. Up above, you see the Hajjaj brothers, Imad and Hussein. I'll talk about these two guys a little bit later. I just want to say they're amazing men because they're irreligious. They both work in Jordan. They've gone to jail numerous times for their cartoons. Next. Now, this is an example of the artwork by young Nadia, and this is the character Willis. And you'll notice she's inspired by an American icon, Rosie the Riveter, which was used during the Second World War to inspire workers to give it their all. Okay, Hussein and Iman. These guys have both been to jail numerous times. And after we posed this picture, they told me the stories about the numerous times they've had to bail each other out of jail, and still they continue to reside in Amman, Jordan. And they both, oddly enough, live pretty good middle-class lives in Amman as cartoonists. In other parts of the world, some parts of Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, cartoonists, I think, are more highly prized than they are here in the United States. This is an example of Imad's work. This is about the John Bolton book about President Trump. He uses the tie of President Trump on the left to represent maybe the serpent's tongue, and on the right, John Bolton's. So you have two serpents quarreling. France! What? Why is he going to France? Well, cartooning for him. Oh boy, big deal. Yeah, big deal. This guy, young, handsome cartoonist from Turkey. I have the worst luck. What did he learn at that forum? Guess what? Couldn't return home to Turkey. And Turkey is an ally of the United States. Remember, Saudi Arabia is an ally of the United States. This is the flesh and blood price of a president who says the press is the enemy of the people. And Erdogan, the king of Turkey, more or less, says, yeah, this young man, enemy of people. 5 lessons. Democracies are threatened, newspapers are dying, free press is dying, journalists are dying, but fine wine cures the blues. Yeah, a lot of security at this conference. Why was there so much security in Paris? Charlie Hebdo. You know Charlie Hebdo? I like to include these graphic photos rather than just talking about it blandly. January 7th, 2015, 2 folks who did not approve of lines on paper formed into shapes that resemble Mohammed and ridiculing their religious faith, decided to take action, and they walked in with semi-automatic weapons and sprayed the room with fire. 11 were injured, 12 were killed, 9 cartoonists and writers, and here are the 9 cartoonists and writers who were killed for lines on paper, ideas. Je suis Charlie. When it comes to free expression, we are all Charlie. Here's the Mohammed, here they are, the dreaded Mohammed cartoons that set the world on fire. They're not really that good. They're not that creative, not that imaginative. I'd give them a C. And what struck me about the furor over the Mohammed cartoons, being a fan of South Park, when South Park began in 1865, I don't know if you noticed the credits, there was always Mohammed. But I guess, you know, you choose the enemy that was in range of your rifle. Then I went to a satire festival. 300 cartoonists gathering in this cow town in the middle of nowhere in France. Went with my friend, Imad, and his wife, Lena. So we became really good friends. This is San Yusle Martel on a busy day. There's the center of town. There were no cafes, no shops, no hotels. Just farmers letting us stay with them, and a high school where 300 of us gathered, and thousands of Europeans came to look at us like a cartoonist petting zoo. It was a blast. And we consumed alcohol beginning every day at 11. Here are 300 cartoonists from around the world. And I want to include this guy. This is Claude. He was my host. He was a middle school teacher. And he told me something interesting. As a Frenchman who lived in this village all his life, he had never visited Normandy. And he'd just been to Normandy the weekend before. And he wanted to thank me and the United States for this sacrifice paid at Normandy, advancing the liberation of Europe. Omaha Beach, Utah Beach. And I was kind of struck by it because Fitzsimmons lost his life at Normandy, a captain, when the gate to the landing craft went down. So I thanked him. And I also said, hey, it's pretty fair trade because you gave us the Marquis Lafayette, the Statue of Liberty, a beautiful work of art, and Brigitte Bardot. Insert your own adolescent sexist remark there. Lafayette, Statue of Liberty, and your mother, Brigitte Bardot. Here, this is what cartoonists look like when we're having fun, drawing each other. It's just not healthy. And I'm sorry about this image. It's mostly guys, but what impressed me, I'm sorry I didn't take more pictures, think about it. Gender-wise, it was a wonderfully mixed group. Save for the Middle East, these three guys to me very heroic. All of them critical of their own nation. I don't even know if they're still alive. Save for my friend Imad, whom I talk to on a regular basis on the right there. Best cartoonist in the world, according to these folks, wins a cow. I was not the best cartoonist in the world. I don't remember who won this past year, but one year, the fellow who won took his cow up to the Eiffel Tower. There's my good friend, and I include my good friend because I'm finally rounding the close of this presentation, because 2 weeks ago, I got an email that my good buddy had been arrested and was facing 5 years in prison for a cartoon he'd drawn. And his cartoon was called a cyber crime because he had insulted an Arab country. Guys my age, that'd be, hard labor, that'd be death for that dude. Well, this is the picture his brother sent me of him being arrested and taken in. This is the cartoon that got him into trouble. Israel had and UAE, a separate country, had signed a pact, and my friend Imad was arguing that the UAE, depicted on the right by their ruling prince, was being humiliated because Israel said to the United States, nah, you can't sell your F-35s to the UAE. It's part of the deal. So the prince agreed to that, and my friend thought that was a humiliation for him. So this cartoon would have cost him 5 years in prison. And why not? Press is the enemy of the people, right? So I launched a campaign. Boom. Others joined in. Boom. And fortunately, within a week and a half, he was let go. The charges were downgraded to a 2-year charge. And then he was suspended. The sentence was suspended, and he was given probation. And this is made of the most beautiful art I think I'd seen of those praying hands of my friend Grateful that I'd saved his ass. And then I joked with him, this is the United States where I'm living. You may have to return the favor, because if things don't go well in November, you may be having to free me from jail. 2 lessons. Hey, see, I'm writing the close. Fear no idea, words matter. These words matter to me, protecting my freedoms, and these words. Sacred cows make the best hamburger. Mark Twain. Americans love satire. Love it, love it, love it. Let's see, stop presenting, and I'm back to normal.
Don't go that far. But there it is right there. Look at this man right there. Firstly, let's give him a big round of applause. Let's thank him very, very much for that. That was fantastic.
Still awake after all this.
You way over delivered there. He said he's going to give us, that was a full hour of nonstop picks. I love it the most. That's awesome. There are some questions. I don't know how much time you got, but you really did cover a lot of them.
So just real quick, what made you decide to be an editorial political cartoonist professionally?
In a way, it was kind of a default position. This is a long answer that the students probably want to hear.
We haven't even started yet. You got all the time in the world. We're setting up cameras.
It was a default position. I was not a great student. I was undiagnosed severe ADHD, which is an asset if you're a cartoonist or a comedian or a writer. But it's not an asset if you want to do a job that requires linear thought. My whole family was a military family, so I was the freak in the crew. And I'm like, God, what am I going to do for a living? And I just loved art. I did not have an alpha male. I did not have an alpha male bone in my creative body. And I was art boy as long as I could remember. So I thought, my God, what can I do in terms of art? And then lucky me, my 2 beautiful brothers get shipped off to Vietnam. And their letters home politicized me at the age of 13, 14, and 15. I ended up drawing cartoons for a school newspaper and for an underground off-campus newspaper called the Frumious Bandersnatch. And I later found out through the FOI, Freedom of Information Act, with the help of a friend of mine, that the FBI had a file on little old Dave Fitzsimmons here in Tucson, Arizona, back in the 70s for my anti-war cartoons. But I didn't think it would be a serious way to earn a living. Growing up in a military family, the master sergeant would hammer me constantly about my career choice. He would make the joke that, hey, why didn't you think about maybe becoming a gargoyle carver? Because, them cathedrals, they need gargoyle carvers. Ha, ha, ha. Very funny. Thanks for the support. So I'm in school, studying advertising, thinking I'm going to sell something while I'm studying art with half art. I'm doing a lot of freelance jobs on the side, murals, caricatures, T-shirts, that kind of thing. And then when I was at the University of Arizona, I decided if I was going to get a worthless degree, I might as well study art and draw naked people. And the greatest benefit to me was working for the Arizona Daily Wildcat and practicing the daily deadline habit and drawing constantly. And when I graduated, there were no job openings. No cartoonists had died or retired. And at the time I graduated from college, there were close to 300 political cartoonists, and I wanted to be a political cartoonist working for this ancient dead idea called a newspaper. And so I begged and cajoled my way across country, garnering over 1,000 rejection letters. And I was finally hired in Norfolk, Virginia to be an editorial cartoonist 10 years after I set out from Tucson.
All right, see, and there's your answer number one. Not too bad. That's that preview answer. That's that good stuff. Sounds good. Fitz, tell me about Titters, because I watched that this week and it was excellent. And you should tell everybody about it because you can do a lot of good here on that internet, apparently, can't you?
Yeah, you can do a lot of good on the internet. In spite of my early resistance centuries ago, I'm an internet addict now. Yeah, did a comedy show for breast cancer research funds called Titters, featuring female comedians talking about female body parts. It was very entertaining. It was a wonderful 2 hours.
Heck yeah. How much money did you end up raising for fighting breast cancer?
Pardon me?
How much money did you end up raising?
We raised close to $2,000, which is pretty good for just being.
You know what? The thing about a group of people, there you go. That's what you do. That's how you do it. That's the spirit. That's what I want to hear. Because that's a big deal. I love that you're doing all that stuff. The last time I got to work with Fitz, okay, so Mr. David Fitzsimmons, was I did a telethon over the, I think it was like April to May, that I got to work for 8 weeks, did a telethon and raised $64,000 for local businesses through the community investment court around here. So doing these virtual things and live streams, and always counting on Fitz, thank goodness, counting on Fitz to show up and do some fun, entertaining things is just one of the best things that you really can do. Do stuff for other people. Volunteer. If I can tell you one piece of advice from me, volunteer. You make more friends volunteering than you do anything else. So volunteer, sign up for things, follow people that are doing great, great things, make them your heroes and mentors, and just try to learn from anybody that's doing the things that you want to do. And this guy right here does a lot of the things that I want to do for sure. So that's why it is like a big, big pleasure for me to have Fitz here. So I'm really excited. We got about 5 more minutes so that those other people don't miss a beat. So I'm going to go and ask another question. We've got a few basics. So one of it is, I'll tell you, how did you get in cartooning? Now you pretty much answered that. That was before. Here's a dangerous one. Hey, where on the political spectrum do you lie, Fitz?
I am a partisan left-wing liberal progressive, and I may express those views in the course of my talk. Those views don't represent anybody's opinions but my own. And please feel free to write a letter to the editor or email me with your hatred and loathing, because it brings me such great pleasure.
If you haven't seen Fitz, he makes a show about that essentially, and answering his your email or playing the phone recordings that he gets from very, very elderly folks around town that don't quite agree with some of these things. The old blue hairs, he calls them. It's a good time, so always check that out. This man never gets trolled. He really does know how to deflect a lot of that hate. Again, another thing that I'm amazed by you, I call him fearless. Like, he's a fearless cartoonist, because it's a dangerous world for cartoonists sometimes. And we're going to get into that. I want to talk about that a little more on the actual stream, which we'll get ready to watch.
This is exciting. I thought I was going to be late. My word. Oh, look at that. Hey, not too bad. Spot on, my friend. Spot on. Usually he draws me with a halo, though. I can swear. So we've got that. We've got, does your goes line personally? Yeah, pretty much. What is your hardest thing you've ever... Oh, okay, that's interesting. What's the hardest thing? There we go. Devilishly clever. What's the hardest thing you've had to overcome before you became, quote unquote, successful?
Oh, my pride.
Oh.
My false pride. It took me roughly 10, 11 years to get the dream job I wanted. I didn't recognize how much rejection I would have to endure. I also discovered that it helps all of you if you're slightly mentally unwell and obsessed with your creative skill, because the world is going to be against you almost the whole way. So it helps if you are just compulsive and obsessed about creating. And that was my sense of it. I just felt that I could not do anything else. And so, in a way, it's a double-edged sword. Did that stand in my way? Somewhat. But I was very lucky in that I was eventually rewarded for my persistence.
Like, yeah, hard work pays off. Don't quit. Everyone's going to tell you to give up, right? They tell you to just give it up, right? Carve those gargoyles, right?
You should give up or quit if your work sucks.
Good point. Practice makes something. It's nothing, I'm sure. I think.
I will never tell you.
Yeah.
I would have made a horrible art teacher.
Yeah.
Number one, I never cared for many of my art instructors. And number two, I could never be honest with other artists. I don't know about you. I just find myself thinking of all the kind, complimentary things I could say to encourage people.
That was me week 2. And then some people stopped showing up with some things, and I got a little annoyed.
So I do just want to go and turn to the room. Does anybody have something specific that they picked up from this, not just a preconceived question? Anything on your mind real quick before I ask them maybe 1 or 2 of these and then we let them go? Come on, don't be shy. What's on your mind? What did you pick up from this lesson? I want to hear one of you. I don't even look at who it is. Don't be afraid. Just a voice in the room. Just a voice in the room now. Come on. Silence is deafening. One of you. Let's go. Come on. Tell me something about this. I don't even see whose mouth it is. You all got masks on. 1, 2, 3. What was that?
How do you find the energy to keep going?
Fish, how do you find this energy to keep going, stay motivated, stay positive, and keep making cartoons?
It's delusional. It's gummies. You know, the great thing about Arizona, I'm medical, because I wake up. You know, they said, well, you know, do you suffer from chronic pain? I said, well, yeah, I'm a liberal in Arizona. Every day I wake up, I'm in pain. Wait, that was a political value. But where do I get my? I get my energy really from my peers. It's the nature of being a social protest artist. It's just becomes a habit. It's kind of unhealthy.
Any other thoughts?
That's a good question.
There you go. Let's go. What do you got?
Like, what are your, I guess, favorite ways to to, especially like now with the pandemic. Close to not, you know.
Sure. What are your ways to find and connect with new artists, especially how we're dealing with the world nowadays? Like, what's your best advice for cartoonists meeting other cartoonists and other artists meeting other artists?
Great question. I have a lot of Zoom orgies with cartoon friends, with cartoonist friends. Also, here's something else. I was not keenly aware of this when I was a student. And every once in a while, I'd be like, oh, I'm amazed this person talks to me. And when you're a student, professional artists just love it when you ask them for anything, advice. Hey, can I come over? Can I hang around with you while you make art? It's like, oh, wow, so I'm all alone here in my monastery. Some fool wants to come and hang out with me. Awesome. So struggle to overcome that fear. And the great thing I found about the online world is people who you might think of as gods. If they're on, like, I went and saw a movie I remember this 2 years ago. I went and saw a movie, Game Night. I liked it. That was funny. So I saw the scriptwriter's name. Right after the movie, I'm in the parking lot. I Facebook messaged the screenwriter of the movie. Great movie, really enjoyed it. Saw my son, had a detailed thank you. Bing, I get a notice. Hey, glad you enjoyed it. I worked on it for 1.5 years, yada, yada, yada. It's like, what the heck? So what do you have to risk? That's the thing. Well, that's why I always talk about getting those 1,000 rejection letters. Is you got to risk rejection. Yeah. Well, you guys think of another question. I gotta go answer the door and scare the Amazon guy away.
Let's go. Oh, look, he's gone. He's gone. Listen. If you don't answer my question, I'll be really embarrassed. What are you all doing? This is a good guy. Look at the town. Look what he's done for you. Please, show him. Oh, I'm desperate out here. My God, I've never been so hot on a stage.
Hey, I'm back.
Oh, hey, Fitz, how's it going?
I'm back. Woo!
You in the back corner, because you're not here.
Those are good questions.
I'll ask a question for everybody. How do you get over just stage fright and fear in a group? Because networking, like you just said, it's important. I tell everybody this. So you might not believe it. I used to have stage fright. Yes, this is all hard work of not being a nerd that cannot speak to humans. You have to get out of your shell. You got to try this stuff. And you can see there's a guy that's gotten out of his shell and certainly tried lots of stuff.
I was not born fearless. In fact, I was a ghost in high school. When I see old friends who knew me back then, they don't recognize me. So they think, you performing? No, painfully shy. What happened to me was in my 30s at the newspaper, I drew the short straw when it came to sending some poor schmuck out to speak to a civics group at lunchtime, whether it's Rotary or Kiwanis. First time, I wet my pants. Second time, it was both functions. Third time, I thought, you're not going to do this. You need some distraction. I felt more comfortable when I had a pen in my hand and a pad. So I took my pen and pad, my large easel pad with me, and I wrote the notes, what I was going to say on that pad, and I sketched while I drew. And what happens is, and Frank can attest to this, you just grow accustomed to being in front of crowds of people. And you develop this thick skin where you don't care.
Yeah.
You just don't care.
There's a rule they say in wrestling is nothing goes wrong when it's live. Just like, oh, this thing's frozen, Fitz. And that was the 3 funniest parts of some of this too, right? Nothing can go wrong when it works, so long as you're just having fun, because what are they
ask Frank's mother. She's a stripper. Same thing. You get used to it.
Firstly. Secondly, I'm the stripper in the family. Comic stripper, thank you very much. Fitz, I told you that in confidence. Quicker than a hiccup, too.
This is good.
Any last things that you want to give to these fine folks whose brains are sponges, just ready to absorb all the beautiful adjectives that you've got to give them and all the fine advice?
Yes, here we go. You see, this is my drawing board where I work. So I was able to draw one cartoon today. I drew one cartoon today. Pretty simple. These are the roughs. These are the failures. These are the mistakes.
There you go.
Gotta make mistakes. Thank God I have a light table where I can trace over them and make each one a little bit better. But be willing to make mistakes. That's my key advice, especially while you're young, and even when you're an ancient dead boomer like I am in my thousands. I'm still making mistakes constantly. So be fearless.
Heck yeah, be fearless. That's the spirit. Let's thank this man again and send him back in the world so he can get another cartoon show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Mr. Powers. I'm gonna hang up now. We'll see ya.
Give him that ever onward. That's what he says all the time. I love it. My favorite thing he said.
Ever onward for democracy.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Boom, look at that. Boom. Hey, that was awesome. All right.